Welcome back to our mini-series on meditation and self-development. Last week we already looked at some of the decision-making strategies that can better enable us to make the sort of decisions that will not upset the quality of our mind when we come to meditate. This week we go a little bit further to go on to look at the way in which we treat other people, also to find out how we can treat people in a way that is compatible with our meditation progress. Sometimes we wonder where all the energy goes which helps us to meditate better. But sometimes it's because of the way we treat people, if we are inconsiderate towards them, or if we don't take their feelings into account, that causes the energy in our meditation to ebb away to the point that we have no richness of mind left to allow us to go on further in our meditation. In fact, there are 4 particular needs which everyone in the world has, something which they are always lacking, which if we can do something to fill in these gaps in their lives, we can always build up a friendship with those people, but not only for their benefit, but also leaving ourselves with a feeling of richness of mind, which will help us a lot when we come to meditate. What are these things which other people are lacking? Well, at base it's resources, it's encouragement, it's a helping hand, and it's also a feeling of security. If we can help to fill in some of these gaps in people's lives by being generous to them, by giving them encouragement, by giving them a helping hand, or helping them out with manpower resources, or else by behaving in a way which allows them to feel that we are consistent and not threatening their security, then in fact we are adding to those people's opinion of us. Also, we are helping to add richness to our own mind. These are 4 particular qualities which, in the culture of meditation, we refer to as the 4 bases of sympathy, or Sanghawatu in the Buddhist terminology. These are qualities which you can find referred to even in management literature. For fans of Stephen Covey, then you will remember these 4 qualities as what's called the emotional bank account. Well, we have only limited time as normal on our program, and what I'd like to look at in particular detail today, leaving aside the aspects of generosity and consistency, is the factors concerning what it really means to give encouragement to other people. Because we often find that by saying too much or by saying the wrong things, we can find that a lot of the energy from our meditation ebbs away via our mouth by the things that we say. So today we're going to be talking about what we call 5-star speech, which means speech which has certain qualities which, if they don't add up to 5, then it's not going to be good enough for us to say at all. We'd be better keeping those words to ourselves. Speech can be looked at in many different ways. There are many different factors which affect the quality of speech. Why? Because speech is so varied. We're not like animals which can only bark or growl, but we have so much choice about what we say and how we say it. If you're looking at speech in general, you can talk about the quality of speech in terms of the intention behind the words. You can talk about speech in terms of the words chosen to express them, whether they are true or untrue, polite or rude, whether what we say is useful or superfluous. And also you can look at the occasion which we choose to say the words themselves. Sometimes the right thing said at the wrong time can add up to disaster as well. So what exactly do we mean by 5-star speech? Is it the same as a 5-star hotel where you can save a little and spend a night in a 3-star hotel or a 1-star hotel and we can still get a night's sleep anyway? Well, what I'd like to tell you on this program is that we don't settle for anything less than 5 stars. Why? Because, not that we are attached to luxuries, of course, but because anything less than 5 stars is not worth saying at all. Most people say too much, and many people find that they are saying just the things which the other person wants to hear, without considering whether the words they are saying are actually transforming that person for the better at all. But if we follow our principle of the 5 stars, then we will find that the things we say are going to be really worthwhile, and they're going to be things which are going to be transforming the listener's life for the better, while at the same time preserving and boosting the energy which we have for our meditation. Well, the first star which we need for our meditation is that everything which we say must be said on the basis of compassion. If we find that we are angry, or we find that we have a bad intention towards the person, often we will find, even without intending it, that the things which we say come out all wrong, or they may be things which only add to the suffering of that person. Usually, if you find that you're angry, or if you feel that the anger is starting to boil up inside you, you'd be better to keep your mouth shut. Worse still is a person who is angry and they don't say things, but they write down threatening notes at a time when they are angry. This can be only worse because it leaves behind evidence of how angry and how stupid you've been. Usually the things which you say when you're angry, a few moments later when you've recovered from your anger, you will be regretting that you've said them at all. So it's better to keep your mouth shut when you are angry and make sure that you have a compassionate intention towards the person before you say anything at all. This is the first star. The second star for our speech is that everything we say ought to be true. This doesn't mean that we say everything that comes into our head, but it means that we should reserve the things which are true and useful to say to other people. Often we hear in the Western world about white lies, by saying things to make people feel better, thinking that that's going to be something positive. But in the end, it only degrades the quality of our speech and the quality of our intentions as a whole. Sometimes to cheer up children we say, "Oh, here comes the most precious little boy in the world." But this can hardly be called artful speech. Rather, it would be better to give sincere appreciation or sincere praise of something which is really good about the children, and that will work for the children at a much deeper level. So even white lies we count amongst inappropriate speech, and something should really be true for us to bother saying it at all. Thirdly, everything which we say has to be polite. Usually you can choose the words which you use to phrase any particular message. For example, you can tell a person not to be lazy, or you can tell them to get off their backside. For myself personally, I would choose the former way of saying these things because it doesn't leave the person who hears it with a feeling of negativity towards us. Really, the sort of vocabulary which they use in the marketplace is not suitable for us as self-developers. And really, a self-developer ought to be a person who is always choosing the most polite and the most reasonable ways of expressing the things which they want to say to others. A fourth star for our speech is that everything we say ought to be useful. By useful we mean that it should be something which the person is learning anew, not something which they've heard before, which they're going to be bored by when they hear from us. Sometimes things can be true, things can be polite, and things can be said out of an intention of compassion. However, they may not actually be very useful for the person to hear if they've already heard it already. Sometimes, supposing everyone in the town knows that a particular person is very corrupt, if you go about saying that this person is corrupt when everyone already knows it, it doesn't actually help to make the situation any better. It just makes people bored and negative as a result of the situation. So sometimes if we know that a person already knows something, it's better not to bore them with it. That will help to make sure that every time we open our mouth, it's only the positive and only the useful things which come out of it. Because it's no benefit just to add on to the things which people already know and maybe they already hate about situations which cannot be changed. Last but not least, we ought to say things at the appropriate time and on the appropriate occasion. Sometimes we can have speech which adds up to all of the 4 stars already mentioned. Maybe something which is true, and maybe something which is compassionate, maybe something which is polite, maybe something which is useful. For example, there was a lady who felt very worried about her husband's condition, that he was drinking too heavily. So she thought to herself that she was going to prepare the most polite way possible to pass on the criticism to her husband that maybe he should be drinking a little less. So what did she do? Well, she knew that saying that he was a heavy drinker was true. She knew that it was compassionate to inform him about this. She knew it was useful to be said. She also was going to choose the politest way of expressing her criticism. So what did she do? She went down to the local pub. Her husband was sitting in front of all his friends, and he was with a bottle of beer in his hand. And she said, "Oh, my dear husband, I'd like to inform you that I think that you are drinking a little bit too heavily." What do you think happened as a result of that? Well, maybe if she got off lightly, she wouldn't have the beer bottle broken over her head. This would be something to say that she did have all four of the first four of the stars of 5-star speech, but she did forget about the occasion on which it should be said. Really criticizing anyone in front of other people is always a no-no in terms of the things which we say. And this is just to say that we cannot underestimate the importance of having all 5 stars if we are to say something. Especially on the subject of criticism, it can be said that there are 2 extra considerations which we ought to bring into play. And this is because no one likes to hear criticism, especially if it's about themselves. Most people like to hide away their faults and hear only their praises. And in fact, we can build on this if we have the occasion to have to criticize other people. This is that if we have to criticize someone on a particular point, then first of all we have to find out something to praise them for first. It shouldn't just be artificial praise, it should be something which we actually appreciate about the person. It should be sincere praise. And we should praise them first before we come around to criticizing them. For example, if we find that a person is usually diligent in their work, but they do make a lot of mistakes when they're working, we might say, "Hey, do you know that you are one of my best workers? But there's just something very small which I'd like to point out to you, that perhaps you need to take a little bit more care not to make so many mistakes in your work." This sounds much better to the person than simply coming out with saying, "Why are you making so many mistakes in your work?" To praise them first will elevate their state of mind so that it's more receptive when it comes to hearing the criticism about themselves. Secondly, when you have to criticize people, something which you have to be very careful of is that you have a smile on your face at the time when you're criticizing them. This is to show the intention of compassion behind the things which you're saying to them. Because if the person thinks that you are picking on them, or they think that you're just trying to find fault with them, then of course they're going to close up their heart and they're not going to want to hear about that criticism from you, even though it may be true. So praising them before you criticize them, and also smiling when you give criticism, these are 2 additional points which you can add on to the 5 stars which we talked about just now when it comes to points of criticism. And another thing to remember is that a person can only take so much criticism. Supposing you have 10 faults with a particular person, you don't need to download all 10 faults onto them on the same day. Maybe you can give their faults to them in installments, maybe 2 a day at the most, to help to keep up that person's morale so that they still will want to overcome the difficulties which they have to try to rectify all the points of weakness which they come across. So you can see that even the factor of speech is something which is very sensitive. When we are speaking to people, we should settle for nothing less than 5-star speech. That is, speech which is on an intention of compassion, speech which is true, speech which is polite, speech which is useful, and speech which is said at the right time. If you can manage this with everything which you say, then you will make sure that you manage to maintain the energy which you better keep for your meditation practice. If something which you are considering to say doesn't add up to 5, then it's better to keep it to yourself. No one will ever blame you for saying less than you need to. So, today we've talked a lot about what we call the 4 bases of sympathy, and we've spent particular emphasis on the subject of saying the right thing at the right time. Maybe this week you should look at some of the ways in which you speak to others to see whether your own speech measures up to the 5 qualities which you've already mentioned. If not, then you should try to adapt your speech in the appropriate way, and you find yourself with a more positive heart, a more richness of mind to take with you into your meditation. This is not all on the decisions which we have to make. There are some specialized decisions which also we need special principles to deal with when we come to making decisions about them. Next week we're going to be going on to another more specialized topic of the spiritual realm of decision making, which are going to use the principle which is known as the Noble Eightfold Path to help us with our decision making. So until next week, please try to keep up your meditation, be observant about the way you speak, and I'll be seeing you again at the same time next week.